Yep, we are live.
Perfect. Let's get back on the screen. Right, there we go. Right, good afternoon, guys. I'm fortunate enough to have my old friend Onur Basar here today. Me and Onur have been friends for numerous years, and he followed the football path like myself. Went into kind of the coaching route. Worked for UEFA for a number of years, roughly 10 years. And went into the Turkish Football Federation, which is a different way of wording basically for the national team in Turkey. And now he's got a role at Fenerbahçe as a team manager, predominantly working with loan players and all the stuff kind of going on behind the scenes. So welcome, Onur. How are you, mate?
Fine, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. Obviously, it's good to see you after all these years and seeing that you're still looking very well and looks like you're looking after yourself, which is always good to see. As you said, we've known each other for many years. Went to the same school, grew up in the same area, so it's always. I think this is one good thing about football, the football world. Obviously, it means that people who have known each other for many years can keep in contact and obviously share ideas, share experiences, and so thank you for the invitation.
Perfect. And then in my eyes, the reason why we kind of do these talks is to give different perspective on the game, different viewpoints, and I think to have someone who's kind of involved internationally, it gives another broadened view of the game, and because it's all about opinions, and that's the beauty of football, that we can discuss for days, weeks, months on our opinions and bounce ideas off each other in a kind of way to benefit us all. And that's why we're doing interviews, to help you kids watching online and give you an insight into the beautiful game of professional football. So Onur, I'm going to kind of go through right from the start. We're going to probably do about 30 minutes, just over, and we're going to kind of get right to the root of your kind of how you got into football, how you fell in love with football. So what's your kind of first memories ever of football? It could have been a grassroots team. How did you get into it? Did your dad or did your brother take you to it? Go on, tell me about it.
First of all, actually, Mark, I'm actually very privileged to say that I remember my first ever football game that I played, which was at Southborough Primary School during obviously the lunch breaks that we used to have. So obviously it was just basically starting to have a kick around in the playground with friends, scoring a goal, having that first taste of playing football in a team, even though it was just a lunchtime experience. Obviously, then from there onwards, I started to play Sunday league football with the majority of our local friends. I started playing at Raglan Rangers Football Club, obviously, which is the Sunday league team. And then, obviously, the more you participate, the more you enjoy, the more you learn at that age, at the young age. You want to obviously spend more time with your friends, go out and play on the park, kick the ball. It's fantastic when you win, disappointing when you lose. And once you experience that from a very young age, I think it becomes like an addiction. If you enjoy it. So then moving from there, obviously I started to play again at Valley Valiants and numerous other Sunday league amateur clubs in Kent. So that's where it all started, really. And obviously during those periods, having good coaches, good people around you, enjoying it yourself, and finding that dedication inside yourself, I think was a good starting point.
Perfect. So already you've touched on there the fun and the love of it. And nowadays we talk about creating the environment, but obviously that wasn't really known back then. But do you feel that's a big part of how you kind of fell in love with football and may have not gone on to be a professional footballer, but still the same, just as a professional footballer, loved the game and stayed in it for so long?
Yeah, I think that's very true, Mark. I mean, when I think of when I first started to play football, I mean, now it's going back almost 30 years. Obviously, the infrastructure, the pitches, the conditions then were not as developed as they are now. So I think the children of today are very, very privileged in the facilities that they're open to, that they have access to. Whereas, I mean, in our times when we were playing youth football, it was very, running around sometimes on the muddy pitches, and the changing rooms sometimes that were not so modern or as equipped as they are today. And even the training materials, equipment that we used to do was usually just the cone setups, and just try and sometimes mix match and try to find little circuits for ourselves to do. And sometimes our head coach would try to find alternatives, and sometimes we'd have to cancel training sessions because of obviously weather conditions. So these obviously would hinder our progression. But obviously, as long as you're dedicated and as long as you feel that you want to continue, I think those were barriers that we all had to overcome back in those days. Whereas now, I think the children, obviously, they can do indoor football, outdoor football. You have the 3G pitches, and I think technology's improved so much now, and the infrastructure's developed so much that I think it's a better stepping stone for the children of today.
Perfect, great answer, mate. So moving on from the grassroots, kind of our kind of period at secondary school, from that rough age to kind of like 11 to 16. Tell me what kind of happened with your schooling journey, or also your football, and how did the two kind of work hand in hand, or was football still a love that you always wanted to be in?
I think, Mark, what happened was I was looking back at my my achievements back at the secondary school, like around the age group that you just mentioned. When I look back, I realised that I won a lot of awards when I was under 14s, under 15s, 16s, 17s. During those age groups, I mean, for the teams that I played for, I was very, very privileged to win Player of the Year, midfielding Attacker of the Year awards, etc., which was fantastic at that age. But at that age, I loved playing with my friends and being with the people that I was used to, and being in the environments that I felt most comfortable in. And obviously, for me, carrying on my academic background was very, very important. I wanted to go to university. I wanted to progress. So back then, it was very, very difficult to do both at the same time, and to be at the peak at both levels, which I think is another aspect now that football clubs these days, they're concentrating a lot on players not only developing on the pitch but also off the pitch, which I think for the youngsters of today is a big advantage.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you touched on that, because they're football clubs and led by the Premier League, particularly in our country. Obviously, you're involved in our country and Turkey, so I've kind of said that the wrong way. But I know that the focus is now on the individual, and helping the individual on and off the pitch to be an all-round amazing person, rather than just honour or mark the footballer, which it particularly was a few years ago. So I think that's great work, and I'm glad to hear that they're doing the same things across the globe as well. So you touched on your kind of your education. I know, obviously, because we're friends, that was very important to you. You even back then, you were very driven and focused on achieving at school. It wasn't so much in our day kind of, you were either a footballer kind of thing, that you wanted to be a professional footballer, or you weren't. That was the kind of only route in football. It wasn't really any other options. But I've been trying to stress to people that nowadays there's so many different routes into football, and so I'm really pleased to have you on, because you didn't become a professional footballer. You took your education very seriously, and now you find yourself at some of the top organisations in the world, not as a professional footballer, through numerous roles, and where you've tied the education, your coaching, and your football love all together. So I think it's a real inspirational story how people can get into football and stay in football, and really the world is your oyster, really, because you can go wherever you want to with a bit of hard work. So I'd like to kind of now touch on uni, and obviously, and then blend into kind of your coaching qualifications. Did you come back into football uni? Tell me a bit about that time.
Well, basically, after 16, 17, obviously, when we were all going to university or making that decision in our lives, I remember we sat with my family on many, many occasions, and we looked at the pros and the cons of going on each direction. Even back then, I was very enthusiastic. I still had a dream, let's say, to be a football player. But I think at that point, I realised that probably technically I was not good enough to be a top professional football player. So I decided with my family to concentrate and go down the education route, but also ensuring to myself and to my family that I would continue to give something back to the sport in terms of coaching, refereeing, and then obviously after finishing my education, making sure that my career path will be down in football. So what I did was, once I started university, when I was 18, I started to, obviously I was still playing Saturday League, Sunday League amateur football, but at the same time I started to coach with, for example, with Petswood Football Club that I had a lot of association with for many, many years. So it was a case of, right, even though I'm still young, I can still start at this young age to give the things that I'd learned from my previous coaches back into the game, and started. I mean, I didn't start under 15, 16, 17 straight away, because obviously they were very close to me in terms of age, but I started with the under 10s, under 11s. And obviously with that, I remember this story very well. And it was sometimes in football, you know, that some things do happen by coincidence and by luck, because it was a Sunday afternoon and there was a friendly match going on, and the referee hadn't turned up for some reason. And the people at the club said, "Oh, Onur, can you referee the game, because we don't have a referee?" So obviously, until that point, I knew the laws of the game, but it was my first ever experience in refereeing. So I started refereeing that game, really enjoyed it. From the response that I got after the game, people seemed to appreciate my refereeing for that game. So then I started to do more refereeing. Then obviously, then you have to go and take your refereeing license and do your coaching badges, etc. So it all built on from there, really. And I think I was lucky, I was dedicated, and I think at the same time, I think sometimes you just have to just take it by the scruff of the neck and just follow your path.
Perfect, great answer. And for the guys that just joined us online, we've got Onur Basar here, who has held various roles at UEFA, the Turkish Football Federation, and now at Fenerbahçe in Turkey. And we're just talking about his kind of pathway in football as a young child, progressed through uni, and how he's kind of progressed to his current pathway through the professional game. So obviously from the refereeing, that gave you another insight into the game. You've been a player, you've been a coach, now you've been a referee. So yes, you're kind of getting all these experiences which are now forming your kind of opinions and the way you see the game and the way you feel it should be taught. And you also got that passion that you want to give back to the game, which is fundamental to anyone in football, because it takes a lot of work and dedication, whatever role you're in. That's, as you know, mate, it's probably the fundamental factors for success in football. So from that, then refereeing times, how to talk to us, because I know you're coming back and forth through the country. So if that in itself was total dedication that you were
yes.
Kind of, so tell us a bit about that rather than me jumping all over the story.
Whilst obviously I was carrying on my coaching and my refereeing in the UK, as well as holding my full-time job, and then in 2009 I started to work for the Turkish Football Federation and UEFA, which was a professional administrative role, which was taking charge of the UEFA financial and fair play criteria, which in today's football, as you know, is very, very hot topic. Obviously, that would look at the clubs in 5 different angles in terms of their finances, their infrastructure, their youth development, and their facilities as well. Obviously, once I started working for the TFF, I started to get also involved in the national team match organisations, match operations, which would mean that all of a sudden I found myself in the top professional level of working with international football clubs, football teams, the national teams. So going into that field gave me an unbelievable insight, unbelievable experience, because the players that you'd see on TV for many, many years, you realise that you're with them for 4 or 5 days during a camp, or just pre or after a match and during a match. So, I mean, I had the privilege over the 10 years at the Federation of working with teams like Brazil, Germany, Spain, France, England. I mean, numerous teams at A level, at A team level, and also at the youth team levels as well. So once I moved into that side, to the professional side, obviously it changed me a lot as well. I realised that I had to continue to develop, but also I had to go through continue the academic development as well. So as you just touched upon, whilst I was working for the TFF at that point, it was very difficult for me to coach for a club in Turkey, because obviously I'm working for the federation. So therefore that would mean a conflict of interest. So therefore I had to continue my coaching back in the UK, which meant, as you said, a lot of traveling back and forth at weekends, taking coaching sessions and then flying back, refereeing some games, flying back, just to make sure that I was still keeping myself active. And these are some of the things that you have to do in order to get your professional coaching licenses, like the UEFA B, and then moving on from there, the UEFA A, which I managed to get in 2016.
Perfect. We talk about a lot of sacrifices and the levels of dedication on the playing side of things, guys. But for me, that's really powerful that Onur knew his pathway. He knew he could see the progress. He's putting in the work, and the sacrifice he's probably making in his personal life as well to come back, whether it's each weekend or every other weekend, flying to a different country. It's not like Turkey's around the corner.
No,
and then
no.
may have been obviously with the national team in Brazil, Spain, all around the whole globe. But at certain points with the camps and with the fixtures coming up, so the sacrifice levels there are tremendous to obviously get to where you want to be, and obviously it's working because you're doing amazing things. Really be proud of yourself as an ex-Ravenswood boy. So you touched on there about obviously the different, you've seen the kind of up to the 23s, or not 23s at the national level, but 21s. So obviously it's probably about 14s, 15s, 16s, 17s, 18s, 19s, and then the 2021s and the 14s. You've seen the full scope of all the, obviously in Turkey, particularly through the Federation, but I'm guessing you would have seen that in various different countries. How do you think, particularly, I'll probably stay away from obviously the first team level, but I'll get you to say a couple of stories on that. But just because we've got a lot of kids on the line, and obviously this is a football academy for kids up to 18, can you tell us how kind of your experience of developmental differences throughout the globe, like to Turkey, to England, to Brazil? Bear in mind you've got that coaching background as well, so there's no one better to be studying this kind of stuff.
I think first of all, obviously, when I lived in England and coached in England, obviously I was doing it at the amateur level, and that part, obviously, whatever level of football you're at, the first point is obviously enjoyment. You have to enjoy what you're doing. I think whether you're a coach, whether you're a player, or whether you're even the parents who are coming to support the children. Now, obviously, once I moved over to Turkey and started to see the younger age group, but at the professional level, I think I started to, what really took me was watching those kids still having that level of enjoyment, that aspect of enjoyment, but at the same time having to also take their football to a serious point as well, in terms of how they would eat, how they would sleep, how they would train, how they would do additional work outside of the training pitch, in terms of having, I mean, there was a lot of clubs that I was with in training camps and tournaments where they would bring along teachers, they would bring along mentors, they would bring along psychologists. So it was not just about going to a venue, having a few training sessions, playing the match and then flying back. It was actually all very much well organized, very well structured, in terms of ensuring that the children not only focused on their technical abilities, but obviously their physical strength, their mental strength, how they communicate with their teammates or their head coaches, how they would rest. So from that side, being involved in those camps and seeing those children, and I have worked with a number of players actually. I think in 1 year I was working with the US national team, the under-16s, and Christian Pulisic, who's, as you know, now one of the biggest players in Europe. I remember being in a camp with him, and just watching those players, seeing how focused they were. But whilst they were focused, they are still very young children, so they still have to enjoy it. They still have to appreciate the fact that they are still in their developing years. So seeing the good teams there was basically, you could see how they were developing, but at the same time how they were also having to take certain aspects of their lives and their general football lives more seriously than maybe, you know, if they were just playing at an amateur level.
Yeah, perfect. And coming on to a coaching side of that, there's a great insight for you, the younger guys, to a bit of the mindset and how many other sides of the game are so important, other than just obviously the skills and the football stuff on the pitch. That's almost the accumulation of all this preparation off the pitch, which then it's almost like your show time, or at the theatre, that's the time where you perform, you know. And there's so many other sides of the games which obviously people like Onur and myself are fortunate enough to know about, and that's why we're involved in football, because we enjoy and want you to show you that and let you benefit in your journey. Because not for Onur, but my journey's starting in coaching now, and obviously my playing days are done. But Onur's flying in his various roles internationally. I aspire to be where Onur's been right now, So we've all got aspirations, we've got to set goals. So I think that's really important as well. So in terms of the coaching, how do you feel the different nations? Obviously, I'm guessing you've witnessed it, you've studied different coaches in various nations in them kind of developmental years. And there's a lot of talk kind of Spain was a big nation that everyone followed at one point. Then it was Brazil was also one. Now the Brazilians are looking at kind of the English game, thinking they want to learn from us, which we find a bit crazy. But the Germans are a kind of standout nation which people follow. What kind of things have you really taken? What have you found valuable in bits you've seen internationally?
I think if I was to just go through the certain regions, I'd say that, for example, the German teams that I've worked with, you can see there that there's a very regiment rule, strict. It's a very, everyone has their duty and everybody knows their duty and responsibilities, and for them it's a very collective environment. So everybody's working individually, then in groups, then as a collective group. I think with the Germans, they're very good in terms of their consistency to work very hard, to push themselves to the extreme limit, especially physically as well. The English game, I think, with the English teams, obviously it's more about passing and moving and keeping the tempo of the game flowing and keeping it high. Obviously, when you look at the Brazilians, it's more about individual talents, the creativity, more the offensive play, if you like. And obviously, when you work with these different groups of people and you see the different styles of play, what I've tried to see was I've tried to always pick out the best of each and try to obviously integrate it into any of my coaching that I've done or any football conversations that I've had with any of the coaches, whether it be at Fenerbahçe or any other footballing environment. However, I have to touch on this point though, Mark. In recent years, obviously, we always talk about the Germans and the Brazilians and the Spanish and the English, but there are also other developing nations such as Iceland, such as the smaller nations in football as well. That I think they're taking very good steps. Okay, population-wise, they're a lot smaller than the top European countries, but when you look at their training methods and how they develop their teams and their players, I think in the coming years we will see more and more smaller nations, I think, develop more in the international game.
Perfect. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. That everyone has these the nations everyone looks up to as the developmental gods or gurus or whatever it is. But Onur's very privileged and worked hard to get himself into a position where he's witnessed some smaller nations which might not get the credit, but equally, or if not more so, are doing amazing things in bringing their development of children and through to a first team, national team, competing with the likes of the biggest nations in the world. So great answer there. So now we kind of move from your role with the Federation. Can we touch on some kind of real highs for you? Like obviously some real moments I've seen all over kind of social media and stuff with Onur with. Just you can probably give us a few because I know that the kids will love it. Like a few names, that shirts you've met, you've got pictures with, you've got the match balls, that ridiculous thing. I'm sitting there, like every boy's dream, and I'm sitting there as a 37-year-old man, jealous as anything.
Well, first of all, actually, I have to say, I think for you, I mean, you've played as a professional footballer, and I have to say, I think for that's a privilege in itself. So I think we all have a lot of admiration for you there. In terms of my own experience, I have to say that as you just mentioned, I have had the privilege of working with probably the best footballers in the world. I've worked with the likes of Neymar and all the Brazilian teams, again the Dutch teams, the German teams, etc. There was one moment actually when we played Brazil. The Turkish national team played Brazil, and they were in Istanbul for 5-6 days. And obviously, I was responsible for looking after the Brazilian team. So being with them in the team hotel for 5 days, sharing the same, corridor as Neymar and Coutinho and David Luiz, etc., and eating in the same dinner hall meal room as them and watching them do their team analysis, watching them do their trainings, and just seeing them in an environment where nobody could really see them because obviously there you have the press restrictions, etc. That was a big eye-opener. And after the game, Dunga, obviously their head coach at the time, he took me in after the game. And as you know, as a professional footballer, after the game, you do the shirt swaps between the teams. So I had 3 Turkish national team shirts with me that I wanted to swap. So the head coach just called me into the dressing room and said, right, the dressing room is yours for 2 minutes. You pick from whichever player shirt that you want to swap with. And I just remember just sitting there, or standing there, sorry, and just looking at the dressing room, and it was Oscar, Coutinho, David Luiz, Felipe Luiz, Neymar, and it was a full Brazilian team. And to watch them just looking at you, it was just an unbelievable experience. And I think it's an experience that I'll always treasure with me. Obviously, there have been other moments like that with all the other teams that I've worked with. I think one special moment was when Turkey qualified for the Euro 2016. We qualified literally in the last minute of the game. It was an 89th minute free kick. We were obviously behind the bench. Yeah, we beat Iceland 1-0, and obviously then we were all on the pitch for the last 5-6 minutes waiting for the other game to finish. I think it was the Azerbaijan game. So during that game, we were in a moment where we didn't even know whether we were going to make the playoffs. And then between the 89th and 96th minute, we automatically qualified for the Euros. So that was also another fantastic experience. So there's been many experiences like that, Mark. But I think, obviously, from my aspect, obviously, for someone who hasn't played professional football, but I've had the privilege to be in the dressing rooms, in the team hotels, in the training camps, I think for any young child who wants to be a professional footballer, I have to say you do make a lot of sacrifices, but if you're very passionate, if you're very driven, and if you're sure that's what you want to do, the rewards are fantastic. And I'm not just talking about the monetary side of things. I think just the whole atmosphere, the environment, obviously you know better than anyone because you've been in those environments at professional level. It's a fantastic place to be for any young professional.
Yeah, I kind of touched on that with my own son. He went to obviously the Arsenal at quite a young age, which was a debatable topic, whether it's too young or whether it's right timing. You know, that we could talk about for weeks on that as well. But ultimately, the experiences that you will get in them environments, whether you make it as a professional or not, there's some unbelievable, the way the game is nowadays, you get some unbelievable experiences which will shape you for life. And then hopefully, and if you work hard enough, you can form a game in a professional game as a player. If not, there's other opportunities. We had Neil, the head of coaching at the Premier League, on 2 weeks ago, and he stressed more than anything that there's so many opportunities in football nowadays other than just the playing side. So I wish I'd known that as a kid, but maybe I didn't wish it because obviously I was focused on being a professional, and that was all I was going to do. So thank you very much, mate. So we're moving from the Turkish Football Federation. How did kind of Fenerbahçe situation and a new role, and how did that initially come about? Because I'm guessing you're obviously very well respected in the national team right now. You've been there for a number of years and progressed through the roles. Tell us a little bit more.
In 2018, obviously, Fenerbahçe, the club, had a change of management. The previous management had been there for 20 years, so it was a change for the club as well in terms of management as well. So during that period, obviously, I was in contact with the new management, and they were looking to form a new team of people to take part of the football side of things. So obviously, at that point, both our visions and our demands obviously matched. And so obviously after working 10 years at the Federation and UEFA, obviously I moved away from the Federation side and moved over to the other side of the table, and I was on the club side. So when I first started at Fenerbahçe, I was the team manager. And obviously now I think in England especially, I don't think there's many teams that have a team manager as per se, because obviously I think the title can sometimes be misinterpreted. My role as a team manager was looking after more of the operation side of things, obviously the team camps, the travels, the administrative side, but obviously you're still with the team, you're still on the training ground, you're still going to the matches in the dressing room. So I was taking charge of that side of things. And obviously, while during my time here, especially in the last year or so, I started to move more into the loan players department, obviously, which was an area that we felt needed developing within a club in the scope of Fenerbahçe, because now when you look at the top clubs in Europe, obviously they all have a very strong loan players department where obviously clubs, they loan players for different purposes, some to bring back stronger, some to sell on, some to obviously because they're not in the plans of the current coaching staff. So that was an area that we thought that needed some concentration. So I concentrated on that side over the last year. So yeah, that's where we are today.
Perfect. And when with the obviously the loan managers, tell us, obviously we had a little chat before this about the kind of in-depth role. Obviously, don't go and watch it, and how do you kind of, obviously don't mention any details you don't need to, but how do they, the first team manager or the first team coach, how do they decide off your information? What kind of information when you're going and watching these players who are out on loan, who are potentially going to come back and make an impact on your first team? How do you relay that information? What are you really looking for?
Well, first of all, Mark, obviously when you loan a player from any club to any other club, you have to make sure that obviously it's going to be a right choice for the player and for the club as well. What we try to do is we try to look for clubs that would play in the same style as us and make sure, obviously, you can never guarantee this, but obviously, if we are going to loan a player, we want to make sure that the player is going to get time on the pitch to develop himself, to, work in a certain playing style. One key thing is to obviously keep a very close contact with your player if you're loaning the player out. Obviously, having weekly meetings, whether it's online, going to actually visit them and watch their training sessions, watch their matches, going and have a look at where they live and how their social life is. Because obviously, as you know, for professional football, especially the young players, it's very important that not only are they well protected on the pitch, but they also need to be well protected off the pitch as well. So obviously, then you're watching their games, whether it be on TV or whether you go to watch them live, and then you then obviously collaborate and report on them. Obviously, as you know, now we have different systems in football. We have the Instats, we have the Y Scouts, we have all the other tools that we can also use to back up our obviously analysis that we see on the pitch, but also statistically as well, what the players have done on the pitch, what their success rate is, and even their movements on the pitch that we can monitor now through various systems. So obviously all these tools gives us a lot of information on a player on one even specific game. And obviously we collect that on a weekly basis. We do obviously monthly, quarterly analysis, and then obviously whoever's the head coach at the time or the people responsible for the actual choosing of the players, then obviously we give that information on to them. Then it's up for them to decide on what happens after.
Perfect. And in that kind of role, what is kind of your measurable successes for you personally? Obviously, is it supporting the player when they go online? You might have a young talent, a young player, maybe 18 to 20 years old, who's just going out and getting some experience, and the whole club team is a really hot prospect or a potential top player. Yeah. When you're out, kind of, do you judge yourself that you're making sure everything's right in every part of his life, that you're taking care of it, and that you're checking in on him, and then when he comes back to the club and performs on the pitch or gets his first chance to make his debut, is that success for you personally?
I think an area that I always try to do is I always try to put myself in the position of the player first of all, because we have to remember that especially the young players that we tend to loan, they are young people, and obviously they have a lot of adrenaline, they have a lot of emotions, and sometimes for a player to be loaned out from a club can sometimes affect them mentally as well, because it could make them feel that either they're not wanted, or maybe some other aspect, or they have to go, or they appreciate that they have to go. So making sure that you're still that bridge between the parent club and the player. It's important for them to know that they're being loaned out, but they're still being taken care of. They're still being thought of. They're still being watched. They're still being analysed, and they're still, that they're still very much part of the club, even though they're on loan. So obviously, especially when we loan players internationally as well to other countries, it's very important for them to not lose that contact with, for example, where I am now. I'm in Turkey. So for a young player who's Turkish to go and play abroad, it's important for us to go and make sure that they're able to adapt to life over there, the social aspects, culturally as well. So obviously these are all things that are a little bit away from football in itself, but obviously just making sure that they're still in a good environment where they can then go to the training ground the next day and fully focus on their football and fully focus on their development. So it's very nice sometimes. Obviously, you never want to face a problem, but when you do face a problem and you're able to overcome it through discussions or through finding solutions, it's very rewarding to see the player then go out on the pitch and perform a very good game after you've had a very good conversation with him. And then for him to go out and show what he can do is very, very rewarding because you feel that you're a part of that.
Perfect. And you kind of said something there that may make people think that you're not part of the team indirectly because you're the loan manager, whatever. But nowadays, the game of football is a squad. It is a team game. It's literally the definition of a team. And the top managers will always have the really high quality people in every department because they realise and appreciate how the loan manager, the chef, that so many kind of other jobs to the bigger picture can produce results on that first team pitch where all the fans, the whole world see that game. But actually, there's so much more going into it in so many different roles. Like little cogs of the wheel, and so yeah, it resonates with me. I understand how important that role is because if that loan system's utilised well, especially with the youngsters, it's such a powerful tool and can make some real impacts, whether that be a first team at your home club or for that player in itself that he may use it as a springboard to now get exposure and go and personally achieve things at a bigger club. It can be used in so many ways. So thanks for that. Mate. I had a question just for the guys. We've got a lot of people watching online here. If anyone's got any questions online, we're going to wrap up soon. But if you want to chuck them in the comment section, I've got a question here. So with all your experiences in the various roles, and they are, as we've been through, there's a lot of roles from the whole journey. Has this kind of, putting your kind of coach's head back on, has this change your philosophy, your own philosophy of how football? I know at first team level, obviously the philosophy is led from the first team manager, so I don't want to in any way impact on that. But has it, in terms of development of kind of younger years up to kind of 9 years old up to 16, has all your experience changed your philosophy? Is it with your national team experience? Are you more focused on results, or tell me a bit about your philosophy for youngsters?
I think personally, Mark, obviously I'm someone who's been in football at youth level as well as the professional 18 level as well. So obviously when you come to the 18 level, obviously results are very important, especially if you're working in a big club or a top national team. Obviously results, championships, trophies are very, very important. But if the way I look at it is that if you're during the age group of, as you say, under 9s to under 17s, 18s, I think, I remember when I used to play, and I used to hate losing a game of football. I literally used to go home and I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to speak to anyone. And I was playing Sunday league football. And obviously for us, a defeat would be a defeat, and you just literally just break down. I think one thing that I think that the youngsters of today need to understand is that, first of all, participation, enjoyment are still the key aspects of whatever level you're playing at. Secondly, I think sometimes even when you lose a game, you can win a lot of things. You can win experiences. You see yourself how you are when you lose a game. You see what goes on around you, and sometimes, obviously, nobody wants to lose a game of football, but when you do lose a game of football, you do lose a game of football. You don't actually lose anything more than that. So every defeat, I think, gives you an opportunity to come back stronger, to develop more, to actually focus on areas in your game or areas in your own personality or in your own character for you to develop further and really try and become as much of a complete player as you can. And then obviously, with all those qualities that you develop, and as you very rightly said, your playing career is really at the top level until in your 30s, 35s. And then if you have developed yourself in many other areas, then I think that also gives you a good a stepping stone to move on to other areas within the game, whether it be on coaching, whether it's administratively, whether it's, going on TV, media. There are so many aspects of football, as you rightly said, that players can follow nowadays. So I think at that young age, especially the developing years, it's very important for the players to not only just focus on playing, winning, but it's also important to focus on the other aspects as well.
Perfect, yeah. And then I'll always remember that when you're playing well, no, you don't really think about what you've been playing well at. Suddenly you lose or you fail at something, and suddenly you're forced to think about it. But actually, that's the best part of learning. Failure is not, you haven't failed, but it's a chance to learn. So that's really powerful words that whatever it may be, lose a game, it's a time to reassess, refocus, and kind of have a self-reflection time that, look, did you do enough? What could you have improved on? And actually, you wouldn't do that if you win, because you're on cloud nine, everyone's happy that you've won, and you don't consider the things that you maybe could have done better. And I think that's a factor that a lot of players, I know myself personally, a lot of professional players and a lot of professional children that I work with, even when they've had a good game, even when their team's won and it's deemed a success, they still judge themselves. They're perfectionists, and they break down every part of their game and really strive for success. They may have won 4-0, but them individuals don't believe they had a good game because they made one straight pass or they didn't make that tackle. They've always focused on that thing that they could have developed to get that perfect game. And I think that's part of the professional mindset of striving to be better every day, every week of every month of every year. So thanks for that, mate. So I think that's going to kind of wrap us up now.
Okay.
Brilliant stories. Is there anything you want to kind of leave us with? Just to wrap up with.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me for this really enjoyable conversation. I think, as I mentioned, I think that you are also a very good role model for us and for our friends as well. Obviously, you are one of the people that made it to the professional level, and I think that the children who are working within your academy, and obviously they should really take note of your experiences and your qualities and try to blend that in with their own life experiences as well. But I think that obviously looking back at where I started and where I am today, I'm happy with the development that I have made within my own career. I think that in football is something where you really need to be dedicated. If you want to get somewhere in football, there are many sacrifices that you do sometimes have to make, whether it's with your personal life, whether it's your professional life. But as I mentioned before, earlier on in the conversation, I think whatever aspect that you are in football, I think it's very rewarding, because the taste of success when you have it is really great. The taste of the defeat is obviously can sometimes be sour, but when you look back at even at the good and the bad memories, I don't think there's anything that I regret that I've done. So that's also good. You meet some fantastic people in this industry. It's great that we can still be in contact. So my final words would be for any young child who's developing is just to keep going, always keep focused, and pay a lot of attention to your coaches, because whatever they say, sometimes it may not sound nice to you, but what they're saying is always for your own good and for your own benefit and for your development.
Perfect. Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of the season.
I will do. You too, and keep in touch.
Bye, mate.
Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.